So Sonder got us started on the meadow and interstitial part of this tour because he had just, after our Meadow House tour, just said, well, what's this? And you could see that we are trying to solarize this area. So actually a good portion of this area, probably up until about, I would say here, was not dealt with by the tractor that had come here and seeded the lawn when we were doing our native meadow planting. So if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen the native meadow planting and all of that rigmarole that we did in order to actually make that work, this area was not really dealt with because we had a fairly large tractor and they can't really work on slopes like this. So this area is heavily infested with like thistle, ragweed, and this reed canary grass. And you could see that it's this type of grass that comes up. It's a cold season grass, so it means it comes up in the cooler seasons. And it's pretty pernicious and it gives plenty of biomass, but there's like nothing else that could grow in it. And one of the things that kind of annoyed me about it is that this is where you sit and look out into the meadow, and all you see is this really big, fluffy grass. And so if we solarize this from spring through, well, we had it in winter through fall, then in fall, we could actually then plant this slope with something. Hopefully the grass will have died. We'll probably even go and take some fire and make sure it's sufficiently dead. Although fire doesn't really kill the roots of this plant. But we'll probably just, to clear the biomass, we'll just put some fire right here.
So doing this, you will kill the root?
Doing this, I think we will kill the root for the full year.
Just for having it on there for a year?
Yes, I think. That's my hope. So I was actually gonna do it now in the spring, but you could see it's already coming up. And one of my friends said, you should probably put it on in winter. So I went ahead and actually put this on. I don't know when I put this on. Was it in December of last year?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
You're probably better off leaving it in there for a little longer than you should, because then it really makes sure that you get rid of this grass because it's so aggressive.
Correct, but this is actually an excessively large area. If you could see, you know, me in relation, this is if I were to do this as a whole garden bed, it would be massive. And we can't afford to put like full plants in here, so we're going to get deep plugs or landscape plugs just to help spread the cost. But you can't plant those too late in the fall because they'll pop out of the ground. So we have to make sure that we plant them a little bit earlier in the fall so that they have time for their roots to catch.
So if this was smaller and you had infinite budget, what would you do? You'd get seeds or something?
Well, seeds would be great too. If we could actually seed some stuff in the fall, which is probably a good idea because we're never going to get enough plugs actually to plug in here. If I had infinite budget, I would be planting like full-grown plants in here if I had infinite budget. But we don't, so we're going to do like landscape plugs and probably some seeds. And that will be actually a good time to seed. And I will probably pick plants that spread, much like the bank planting that I talked about in the Meadow House garden tour. I'll probably pick some plants that are readily spreadable. And I'll show you when we get up to the upper place, like pycnanthemums, which are our mountain mints. Those are excessively good at being able to spread very easily. Now you'll notice that I also have these like white flags in here. This is all that ragweed and asters. Asters are great, but the ragweed is a little crazy. So these white flags, I kind of put white flags in places where I think it would be nice to plant some trees. And that's something that we're doing in the meadow here and there, because it's really nice to be able to have some privacy and a way for your eye not to just go all the way back, but to actually have interest throughout. And we were talking about if we are ever to build something, maybe we would build something in this kind of area in the back. And I would want some privacy between the Meadow House and whatever we end up potentially building back there. So I figured having a large oak and then maybe some smaller trees, maybe some cornices or some cercis that we could plant around. And I just put these flags right here so that Sandra and I could discuss whether that would be good places. And we're going to get a post hole digger soon to fix some of the deer fence for the posts. But I figure we could also use the post hole digger here where we create some holes to plant some future trees. I don't have those trees now, but what I figured we could do is like dig a hole big enough, because it's very hard to dig down here. It's super, super rocky. And what I could do is probably backfill it with some of our compost. And normally I wouldn't amend the soil like that, but the soil is so rotten back here with all the stone that was brought in that I just want to be able to fill the holes with something that would be easily dug out, because we're probably not going to get around to actually planting anything right away. So let's take a look at it. I mean, this is approaching our 3rd year with the meadow, and we were a little late to cut it back, but as you can see, this is what it looks like at this time frame in April. And you might say, oh, this looks like nothing. And I would agree with you. But if you then bend down and see some things here, you may be able to start identifying some of the plants that had been here or are coming up. And this is our Zizia aurea. So it's our native golden Alexanders that are coming up. And I know there's Polemonium around here, but Jacob's ladder, here's some more of that Zizia. And it usually comes up pretty early, but I'm not seeing it right away. But you can see some of these thistles. These are, I'm gonna have to come in here and take out, which is, this is probably one of the biggest challenges. This, Rosa multiflora, and teasel. I don't really love all the teasel. It's really hard. And curly dock. Those are some of the ones that are really hard to control here. Now, some of this is actually our solidago, but then you'll start to notice also a lot of penstemon, which is our beard tongue. We had a ton of that last year, and it was really lovely to see. It's kind of an early plant. I think that it must be the host plant. I don't know if it's a chosen host plant of the Baltimore checker spot. Normally they like the Chelone glabra, which is our turtle heads, but I saw a lot of that caterpillar on the penstemon last year. Here's some more of that Zizia coming up, so it's in clumps. And I think we're gonna maybe just walk up this way and I'll show you some of the lupin that's coming up. And as you know, like lupin is the host plant for, I believe, the Karner blue butterfly. Now, I don't think, we're in the range of the Karner blue butterfly, but I don't think we have enough of a sufficient population here to support that butterfly. I don't think that butterfly is around here. But the lupin has seemed to really taken to this meadow. And so it'd be my hope that maybe we could actually find that butterfly and have it here. So I'm hoping that the lupin, this is gonna be the 2nd year the lupin has come up, and we're hoping that we could get a sufficient enough population of the lupin, which I'll show you. I think this is the penstemon coming up. See, it's really hard to tell right now. Everything's just so low and green. All right, so we've made our way over to the side of the pond. Sandra and I actually did quite a bit of work here. I didn't show you the massive pile of honeysuckle and multiflora that we took out.
Almost
Sandra just fell into the gully. But we ended up taking a lot of stuff off of this area and some of the old trees. But I wanted to bring you over here because this is where some of the lupin had gotten seeded. This is something cool coming up. I just don't know what it is. Here's some more penstemon. But here's where the lupin is. It really thrives in this kind of rocky substrate. And you can see it's very easy to tell this one apart from the others because it has this palmate shaped leaf. And it's coming up all throughout here. Pretty impressive. So, and they have this like projectile seed as well. So I'm hoping that the rest of this area gets seeded. We really only had 40% seed of what we needed to seed this area. And a lot of the old stuff kind of came back up as well. So in hindsight is 2020, I wish that we actually cut back that first year we allowed everything to grow up that first year, and we ended up getting a lot of like Daucus carota, which is our wild carrot, which is not the worst thing in the world. It's a great medicinal. It actually is a host plant for many of our insects here because it's in the carrot family. And it's got a pretty flower as well, but we have a lot of it. So I wish that first year we actually cut back a lot of the flowers. But yeah, the lupin is all throughout here, which is pretty good. And then if you just look in the back in the distance here, Sandra and I, when we have to like cut this meadow, he was getting sick and I was getting sick of the fact that sometimes we forgot where we planted the trees and we would just unceremoniously decapitate them because the trees we planted were very tiny. So if you see, and you come back here, minding all the lupin in between, it's all throughout here. We have some of these tree stakes now. We bought a few and then we just started to rip our own. And they have where these trees are planted so that we don't come in as the grass grows up and decapitate them again, which has happened, unfortunately, one too many times. This one you could see a little bit better. This is one of the spruces. So,
yeah, so the flags are good, but once the grass starts to grow to the height of your hips, then you can't see anything anymore.
Exactly, and the flags get bleached as well, or they fall over. So we came in here and we started to identify what was planted. So here's another one. This may be like a serviceberry. I can't remember what we've planted, but all throughout this meadow, that's what it looks like. And I think the trees are really taking off this year if we didn't decapitate them. And I think let's like make our way over to the place where I planted the allium so we can look at that. And then we'll look at the interstitial. Oh, here's some penstemon. This is definitely penstemon. You can see it actually gets pretty woody. And we came in here and actually and just like cut this off. But this is all the penstemon coming back. This looks like the Queen Anne's lace. And then you could see part of the reason why I don't like teasel. Look at that. I mean, it's a big stalk. It's really hard to take out. This looks like somebody's fluff. Somebody looks like they got hammered here, unfortunately.
And that's multiflora right there, which is what we're trying to take out.
Wait, no, this is not multiflora.
Oh, really? This not?
Oh, that might be, but this is cornus. And this stuff is beloved by deer. It's our native cornus.
This one seems
yeah, the red
heavily
twig
mowed
dogwood.
down.
And so I left this, and you could see some of the buds are coming up here. But yeah, this might be our rubus actually, not our multiflora. But yeah, so this deer will eat down, and it's actually good to cut down your cornus so that you could maintain the red twigs. We have yellow twig, red twig dogwood. It's hard to say fast. And I wanted to leave that here because that's our native cornus. We'll have to give you an update on the meadow, like in late May, because that's when all this lupin is going to be in flower. And you'd be surprised, like I seeded a lot of lupin.
What's this stuff? I mean, there's a lot in here. Like, look.
There is.
Everywhere. Look, what's this?
This looks like...
This looks slightly different than...
Oh no, this looks like our vetch.
Yeah.
So you see this, it has a little... Yeah, this looks like our vetch coming up, which is good. It's a good nitrogen fixer, and so is the lupin. But it's really funny, you seed a lot, and it's a large area, but in relation to the whole meadow, it totally gets lost. So, but this is the most exciting year for the meadow because we're approaching that 3-year mark when a lot of the perennial plants will have started to come up. Look at the geese.
Where are they?
They're walking up the path. All right, so in another episode, we ended up planting around 3,000 allium, and my goal was for them to come up anywhere between June and September.
They're coming right back.
They're pretty magnificent birds.
Yeah, they fly really, since we're so high on the hill, they fly really low too. You get to hear their wings like,
Flap over your head.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. But they probably drop in the pond.
So Saunder's stepping right on our alliums.
Oh, here they are again.
And yeah, we planted about 3,000. It's really hard to see them. You see, here's one coming up here. Here's another. You could actually smell them. I smell that you stepped on them because they smell like allium.
Now, if I step on one, will it come back?
Yeah,
or
of course. You know, it's not like you're stomping on it. They're all throughout here. Here's another one. Here's another. Here's another coming up. There's one out there. I see that looks like it got kind of clipped. And we were a little late to the game, as I had mentioned, cutting back this meadow. And I was getting a little stressed out because I know the alliums start to come up, all the leaves start to come up, the lupin comes up relatively early. And we planted the allium all throughout here. So on this way down, actually some of the larger ones are down here, I'll show you.
Well, yeah, they're a little thicker and more like V-shaped.
Here's some big ones that you could see. And what's nice about these is that they don't get super tall. These ones that start to bloom early, you can see that this is about to, this will probably bloom in, another month or so. And they get about yay tall, though the grass isn't that tall quite yet. So this starts to be like basically the tallest thing in the meadow. And some of these have really big flower heads. And what I love to see is when the birds just like perch on them, like Miss Muffet on her tuffet. And they just sit on top of the alliums. Now the birds are sitting on the sticks that we put in where the trees are. So we are often pointing out the birds on sticks.
Bird lollipop.
Bird lollipops, yeah. But these allium are coming up. This is penstemon right here that you see coming up here. So that's all throughout. And it really provides a really nice bloom. I'd love to actually plant more, but they'll naturalize on their own. And that's not one of the native plants, but I figured as somebody's walking up, it's so beautiful to see some of those alliums. But later in the season, like I said, it's amazing how much everything else grows up around them, and you plant 3,000 of them and they just like fade into the landscape and you're like, did I really plant that many? Yeah, it's pretty impressive how the landscape just gobbles everything up. I guess we'll point out the orchard, right? Why not? It's kind of on the way.
It's in the meadow too.
It's in the meadow. So our orchard, which we've done a number of episodes on, has had its fits and starts. We were a little late to the game in putting up some of these fences. And you could see that some of our things have gotten eaten by deer. Luckily, they have some buds. I think this is a blueberry. So my hope is that we don't have too much die-off, but we might have to take 1 or 2 of these trees out.
There's a bird
There's
lollipop.
a bud on a stick. A little tree swallow. And you'll notice that I did a... You got pretty close.
Yeah, you get really close.
Yeah, tree swallows are pretty affable to amenable to humans. So I did a whole episode on kind of like permacultural plantings within this orchard. And so we have a lot of like herbaceous perennials that we have here. And some mints, agastache, pycnanthemum. This is the pycnanthemum. You'll actually see all the old seed heads. So I could come in here and actually probably chop and drop these, but look at all that mint coming up. So this is going to be rhizomatically spreading. Now, if it spreads into the meadow, we don't care because this is some of our beautiful native plants anyway, and we'd love to see it actually spread. But you can see that our orchard is not that far along. It's just starting to get buds on it.
Yeah, and what we had too with these fences that they kept blowing over in the wind and the deer would come and eat it. But now we've driven T-posts in here so that they actually don't blow over anymore, which is a great idea.
Yeah, so we ended up, like Sandra was saying, we ended up getting, they blew over. You'd find the tree collapsed like under the fence, and then it would be eaten the next day by the deer. So we have to basically come in here and start to clip off some of the dead branches. Here's some of our chives coming up, by the way. I planted some garlic chives and regular chives. Here's one of our little cherries, or bush cherries.
Prettiest one so far.
Yeah, and this is also a really nice ornamental. But here, you know, they're just not that far along. This one hasn't even flowered yet, which is probably a good thing, because what happened last year, and this is what killed a lot of our Japanese maples and whatnot, is we had a late polar vortex freeze. And what I was sharing with Sandra, I was like, I think it feels so late this year with the buds is because a lot of these trees have learned their lesson from last year, and we had so much bud drop, we had so much leaf dieback. So I think they're taking their sweet time since we got that like late freeze. And it's still freezing at night here. So it's pretty cold. So that's why I haven't put in any tree circles or anything yet, because the ground is still like mushy and frozen. Now you'll notice that we started to put stakes or sticks in some of the smaller trees and shrubs that we planted here. Some of the trees that don't get eaten a tremendous amount are the ones with red leaves by both insects and our deer. So these are some of the ones that I think are the most prolific. These are the ones that we ended up putting stakes or T-posts on. You'll see that we're just starting to get leaves on these, and they're very small. And so it's very easy for us to actually clip them when we're mowing. So here's another one. Buds are just starting. Again, it's much more affordable to actually plant smaller trees and shrubs. So these weren't really full grown when we got them. Some of them we invested in larger trees, and you could see where they're at now. So something like this is our Hollywood plum. God, it looks so beautiful. And typically I didn't want to plant too many red leaf varieties, but because the person before us had some red leaf plants here, I wanted to dot them throughout, just to kind of carry that theme through. But most of this, the idea of this interstitial area was to keep it a little bit more savanna-esque. So shorter trees, a lot of these trees won't grow more than 30 feet. Shrubs will be like maybe 3 to 6 feet tall and wide. So nothing really gets too tall here. And my idea was, as you're coming up the driveway, you would see a lot of these pretty flowers, especially in the springtime. We aren't there yet because obviously a lot of these trees are not that large. But I also wanted to have trees that would be kind of permaculture-esque for animals. So a lot of fruits and nuts and shrubbery for animals.
Yeah, and just to mention, this will be a place for a future greenhouse or something like that.
Yeah. Initially the greenhouse was
it's just a placeholder for the position in the land is really interesting. So.
Yeah. I mean, greenhouse used to be first on the list, and now it's gotten punted back.
Yep.
Now this has gotten eaten. The tips have gotten eaten. This is one of our circuses, but you could see there are still, they get their buds like kind of around the stems and the trunks. So I think that saves them, but the tips have been eaten off. So this is a pretty resilient tree we've found. Circus canadensis, we're kind of on the northern border of it, but it's a tree of such significant horticultural value that it's very accessible here. Now, this is our serviceberry, our amelanchier. So you kind of notice them growing in the understory of forests. So I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I wanted to collect more of our different species of amelanchier. Very difficult to kind of tell them apart. They're in full bloom right now in our forest, and so I brought some of that serviceberry out into this environment as well, kind of just pulling it out a little bit. And you can see they don't grow that tall. They're kind of a little bit more wispy stemmed. And they flower early in the season before the rest of the deciduous plants put leaves on. But here, I mean, how would you be able to tell that this is something that we planted? Look how tiny this is. This is like a little tiny prunus, it looks like. So that's why we have these stakes. Here's a cornice. A lot of these have gotten cut back by the deer, but I'm not worried because if we actually get that deer fence working, then we shouldn't have to worry about it from going forward.
We should be able to get that working, and I don't want to have to deal with any more deer from now on.
Yeah. I mean, because, I don't either.
I mean, one might still make, like, first of all, our current fence takes 90% out.
Yeah.
It's really just 1 or 2 deer that get in.
Let me explain. It was so amazing because we have one deer who considers this her territory, and then she has fawns here every year that we've been here, which hasn't been that many years. This is our third year, I guess, going on. When we took the fence down, that fence that we replaced by the Meadow House, for like 2 or 3 days, right? It was down for a few days.
Yeah, because you have to take the old fence down and put the new one up.
So there's going to be a lapse in time. It was like, Sandra was like, the bar's open.
Yeah,
we had
like
8 or 6, 7, 8 little babies, probably 1 year or 2-year-old fawns that had come in and just started to make themselves at home eating everything. And it's amazing what a fence could do. And some people have asked us about that, and you could refer to our deer videos, because folks are like, well, why keep the deer out? I thought you were like all for nature. Well, if you have a garden, and this is a large garden, if you have a garden and something's eating your garden, are you going to put a fence around it if you could prevent them from eating like the food that you're growing in your garden? Or another thing I would say is that if you have, like, let's say you have sheep or chicken that you're raising sheep, you're raising chickens, maybe you're raising them for food, maybe you're raising them as part of your family, feathered friends, furry friends, and then all of a sudden the coyote come in and start slaughtering them. Well, that's your investment. Those are your pets, those are the things that you're raising maybe for food. Are you just gonna let the coyotes slaughter them because you don't want to put them away in a coop at night, or you don't want to fence them in? It's nonsensical. Like, we've invested a lot into our plants here, and the deer are overpopulated, so we want to keep them out on the 20 acres that we're actually growing, and then they could have the rest of the 60-something acres outside for them to actually munch on. But we want to make sure that this is protected. We want to make sure that we have like forest regeneration that's actually happening. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. It's not that I don't love deer. I think they're really beautiful creatures. I love seeing them even when they're on our land, because I just think they're so elegant. But you also want to protect your investments. The same thing would go, whether it's an animal or whether it's a plant, you want to be able to protect those. So that's kind of our compromise. That's the way that we think about it. It's the way that I think about it. Now, some of this stuff this is our native spirea. So this is like our meadow sweet that's coming up here. And then this, I think, is, this might be the salix that I planted, or it could be another cornus. But you can see these are kind of all chopped down by some of the deer. Again, like, this is really good food for them, but they're very resilient plants. But you can see we planted quite a lot in here. And it doesn't look like much, but I guarantee in maybe 3 to 5 years, it's gonna look phenomenal. And if you step back and look at everything that we've planted, it's a lot. So, like I said, give us 3 to 5 years and then you'll see some more. And then down here, I'm not gonna walk down the whole way, but I'll show you some close-ups. We're like, the daffodils are on fleek. These are things that we hadn't really planted here, but they have started to naturalize pretty readily. And we don't mind them. I think we'll probably plant some other different types of plants that are coming up, but I'll show you some of the bulbs in our bulb lawn up in the front gardens, but we'll save that for another episode. We'll be sharing how the gardens and wildscaped areas mature as the seasons progress, so if you enjoy videos like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button to help us grow and share these videos to more folks. In the meantime, we'll be cracking away at more of the gardens and renovations here at Flock. We'll see you in the next video.